Climate change is happening. In response, is human change happening too? Beyond the stagnating political debates driven by the fears of change from a financial infrastructure built on fossil fuel industries, what are individual people thinking, feeling, envisioning, and doing about climate change? Here in the Rogue Valley of Southern Oregon, how is climate change affecting people's lives, their health, their families, their jobs, the way they run their businesses? These interviews cover just a handful of people, their concerns, their hopes. These are Voices of the Valley. Climate change is already causing significant health effects on humans, especially the more vulnerable. Dr. Jim Shames, Medical Director for Jackson County Health and Human Services since 2002, is already strategically addressing the interrelated systemic effects of climate change on the health and well-being of the Rogue Valley communities.
There are a number of effects that are projected health-wise as a result of climate change, and we've had a week of really severe smoke and air quality problems because of the wildfires that we are having this year. What are some of the effects that you think will happen as we go forward and they become more severe and more frequent, as many scientists project?
Right. Where the thing to remember about air quality is, those who are robust, disease-free in the middle of their lives often can tolerate small particulate matter. They have a little bit of a cough, or the heat. They have good sweating mechanisms. They're able to manage the climate-related changes more easily than the more fragile among us. So newborns, people with chronic illness, people with heart disease, lung disease, the elderly, they don't have the same degree of reserve. So weather like this that we're having right now, with poor visibility and lots of small particulate matter, it makes it hard to breathe. Mm-hmm. Folks have a hard time being outside. It really restricts the kind of life they can live, the quality of their lives. That is an absolute consequence. And if you project forward and you say, well, we're going to have more of this for more months out of the year, and it's going to be more intense, it will greatly impact not only people's health, but the kinds of lives they get to live. Mm-hmm. You can't go out and exercise and appreciate the natural beauty if it makes you cough and wheeze and causes chest pain.
Mm-hmm. The increase in algae blooms that we've been having in some of the lakes locally, they become more frequent, and it seems like they're taking longer to dissipate. But what do you see happening going forward with those in terms of human health?
That is one of many examples of what's going to happen as the waters get warmer. Algae will grow more abundantly. We get nitrogen runoff from fields that will fertilize them, so to speak. Some of those algae are toxic, but there can be definite health effects, and there probably will increasingly be bodies of water that we can't drink from as a result of that. Mm-hmm. And these are things that are going to affect the fish, and the change in diseases, the change in the animals that can live in a particular mm-hmm. environment. Just a few degrees Fahrenheit change will have profound effects, and one thing leads to another. The algae blooms may be an annoyance to us, but it may be fatal to other mm-hmm. animals within the larger ecosystem.
One of the concerns that isn't really necessarily a direct health threat immediately, but is something that is a concern with some officials and scientists, is disruptions in the food supply with increasing droughts, torrential rains, loss of farmland, and with the really extreme storms, effects on the distribution network that we have to get food to people. What do you see its effect being in combination with some of these others on people's health?
At public health, the entire county is really my patient. And so we do need to think about the socio-political, economic effects, because they affect the health of the entire community. So all those things you mentioned are vitally important to consider if we want to look ahead the next 10, 20, 50 years of the well-being of the citizens of Jackson County. So yes, what kind of food are going to be available to us, what's going to be able to be grown here locally, how is it going to, how are the foods that we need going to get here, the climate changes in relation to pathogens, people moving here, getting hotter, the air getting smokier, all those issues we have to put into the mix, and they're all going to affect the well-being and health of Jackson County. So I guess for us, what is already happening is that we have air quality issues and we have heat-related issues, and if the pattern of less and less water being retained in our aquifer continues, we're going to certainly have difficulty with agriculture, just having water to drink. I'm not a climate scientist. I don't know what all the modeling tells us, but they're all going to have public health effects.
You'd like to make, is the county working on any plans, as far as you're aware, to cope with some of these projected problems?
We do talk about climate change. We've had conferences locally, and we've gone to others where we've looked at the public health consequences of climate change. But we kind of rely on folks like the CDC and the Oregon Health Authority and others who have more resources to help guide us in those areas.
Dan Bish comes from a family who date back to the earliest settler days in Oregon. His family-run business, Plant Oregon, is located in Talent and specializes in native plants, trees, and river restoration. Because of climate change, he has had to adapt what he cultivates and has become motivated to adopt green business practices in the operations of his plant nursery.
You've been here long enough to see a great deal of shift in climate patterns over the years. What is your experience with the weather in the time that you and your family have been here, as far as you know?
Seems to be warming up, just in terms of not as much snow. We used to get 18 inches of snow here, and we don't anymore, obviously. One thing I have noticed is the Doug fir have died, and the droughts have caused a lot more beetles, and so a lot of the native trees are dying. And so what we're doing in the nursery is no more Portland plants. Instead of growing things from the north, we're growing things from the south and bringing the warmer, drier plants northward, the hardier species. Need less water.
And also, you're right by the creek here, I notice.
Yes.
So, do you have any concerns about water?
Oh yeah.
When we have these droughts come?
Oh yeah. We've gone to complete drip irrigation. Every tree in the nursery has its own little sprayer, just tiny little sprayer. And so that 2 summers ago, we had a really severe drought, and the creek went dry in June. And so we just sipped off our wells. We have 3 wells, but we ran this whole piece of the nursery on 8 gallons a minute. And so that's not very much water, but with timers and drip irrigation, we can cycle through everything, give everything a drink of water. And so compost. We use mycorrhizae, helps the plants pull in nitrogen. And well, and one aspect of the business is river restoration. And the money for that is actually coming in terms of cooling the rivers. And so they've done computer models, and if you plant enough trees on the south side of the river and shade the water, they're going to keep the water cool. And so the problem there is we don't want to be warming the planet while we're cooling the rivers. And so every time we start a truck and head off to a job, it's like, oh my God, I wish we had an electric truck. Where's our transportation system, right? No sense warming the planet. But yes, in our snowpack, so Little Wagner Creek here is dependent on Mount Wagner and the snowpack up there. And so if we don't get snowpack, we're in trouble.
What would you like to see government entities on the local, state, national, or international level do to mitigate climate change in some manner?
I just can't quite believe that we have known about this problem for so long and we haven't adapted. You know, what would insects do if they weren't adapting all the time to their environment? They'd be gone, you know? And we're just ignoring it. It's like not really happening. We can just keep driving. We can just, ODOT just spent $100 million on a new freeway interchange in Phoenix. $100 million. How much rapid transit would that have bought, you know? And there's no infrastructure in that interchange for anything other than cars. I mean, there is you can get across on the bike, but there's no train station, there's no, you know, train track. They rebuilt all the bridges in Oregon over the last 5 years, right? I'm sure you noticed. And there isn't that extra little lane for the train track. Or where's our plan? What is the plan? You know, and then I guess the other thing, if I could see like a place to add progress or to add demand for the electrification and or the clean energy system, and that would be in organic agriculture, because we've pulled pesticides out of organic agriculture, we've pulled out chemical fertilizers, and there's one more poison we need to pull out, and that's fossil fuel. You know, if every farm had to increase their fuel efficiency every year by 5% or something easy.
And what would be your message to people in the valley, if you could boil it down to one thing to try to deal with this
it's kind
problem?
of maybe always considered like the carbon logic in the whole thing. Where is the carbon logic? And always take that into consideration. We can build that into what we're doing.
Some of the most motivated advocates for addressing climate change are the youth, whose future is most urgently at stake. Our Children's Trust in Eugene, Oregon, has filed a landmark lawsuit against the U.S. government. The Ashland Youth Climate Action Group has been instrumental in securing the Ashland Climate and Energy Plan. Nicoletta Dinelli of Talent, Oregon, is another one of the region's youth who has been so energized by the imperative call of climate change that she has decided to major in environmental studies, its policies, and law.
How did you become aware of climate change as an issue and as something that you want to be really concerned about?
Well, my parents always raised me to be very aware of the planet and how I treated it and things like that, but it wasn't until a couple years ago in high school when I took my AP Environmental Studies course that I really was exposed to all the information that there is to know, and I understood how passionate I actually was about those issues, and I got caught up in all the specifics of it and how much I actually enjoyed learning about those things.
I understand that you had a focus for your senior project that had something to do with that issue. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I wanted my senior project to have to do with environmental issues, so I contacted Rogue Climate, which is a local environmental organization, and it was actually just like an 8-minute walk from my school. So I would walk there after school and plan, and I organized a small art show at my school, mostly featuring my own art, but I got some art donated from other students. It was all environmental themed, and it was sold like a silent auction, and it went really well. It was a fun time, and I was able to help out Road Climate, and that's how I got involved with Road Climate, and I've been volunteering with them for like a year now. So I try to head over to whatever volunteer events they have going on. Mostly their main focus right now is the No LNG campaign, which is a very prominent issue here in Southern Oregon. There's a proposed pipeline that would stretch through 4 counties in Southern Oregon of fracked natural gas. And it's the 3rd time this project has been proposed, and it's the 3rd time we're trying to shut it down. So that's the main focus for Road Climate right now, and that's one of the main things I've been helping out with.
You decided to focus on environmental studies in college. Can you talk about what your long-range goal is there? Exactly what degree do you want to get, and do you want to pursue an advanced degree? And then from there, what do you hope to accomplish in your career?
I plan to major in environmental studies, undergraduate, and then I hope to go on to pursue law and policy in the environmental scope of things. And I really just want to help hold people in power accountable, especially in an environmental way. Big polluters, corporations, and government officials, things like that. So that's something that I want to help out with.
Well, what would you like to see those that are in positions of power now do in regard to climate change and related issues?
So climate change is a very critical issue for my generation, and because of the danger that it poses to people and the future, I demand that government officials and people in power really find the courage within themselves to take that step and that initiative in the environmental progressive movement, because really our country is way too dependent on fossil fuels, and I would like to see that be a focus for government officials, since that's something that they can pretty easily try to focus on. And I think that renewable energy would not only decrease our contribution to climate change and pollution, but it would also be a sustainable economic boost. And it would help alleviate some of the hardships that people face because of climate change, and usually those hardships fall into vulnerable and marginalized communities. So renewable energy, I think, is really something that people need to invest in. And as a country, I think it shows short-sightedness for America to not be progressive in that field.
Outdoor workers face debilitating health challenges from escalating summer temperatures. When just securing mandated shade and drinking water during a work break can become a social justice issue. We met indoors with farm workers Maricela Ruelas and Juan Escareño during the worst of the summer's wildfires, when unbearable smoke meant canceled workdays and therefore loss of income. Their stories are an example of the intersectionality of climate change and social and economic justice.
Yo he vivido por 7 años aquí.
7.
Yo he vivido por como 20, voy para 23 años aquí.
Yo actualmente trabajo en la uva, pero trabajé en la calabaza.
Yo trabajo en las huertas, en las peras. Yo sí he notado que últimamente es como más humo y más caliente.
Yo desde que llegué aquí, que fue en el 2010, sí he notado mucho los cambios climáticos que ha habido hasta el día de ahora, porque antes no era más fresco, no había tanto humo, y últimamente está más caliente, y por el calor hay más lumbres y el humo. Pero cuando yo llegué aquí no estaba tan así.
Solo en 7
En 7 años.
años.
Ahora con Timás, el que tiene 23 años, me imagino que...
Entonces ese año ha sido un año más caluroso que el año pasado. Y igual de los incendios, había muchos y hay mucho humo también. ¿Y cómo es que liden con eso del humo en el campo o con el calor?
Pues sí molesta el humo porque hay veces que se tiene que usar máscara y pues a mí lo que me invade mucho es que como que me lloran los ojos hasta que llego a la casa a ponerme gotas, pero sí molesta mucho el humo.
En mi parte, cuando es molesto trabajar con una máscara por el calorón que está haciendo y traerla, el estar respirando es molesto, pero pues tiene uno que trabajar así. Pero ya ahorita con los calores que están haciendo no puede uno a completar las 8 horas de trabajo, entonces nos afecta a no completar nuestras horas y económicamente.
Entonces ustedes como trabajan en las huertas o en el campo, con este humo que ha habido, ¿qué es la cosa más difícil que han enfrentado con eso?
Sabemos que nos afecta nuestra salud, porque la respiración luego empieza a arder la garganta, a doler la cabeza, y ya se tiene uno que retirar a nuestras casas, porque no se puede trabajar así. Y tanto en los cambios climáticos, tanto en el calor como en el frío, porque ya ahorita cuando hace calor está extremadamente caliente y cuando hace frío es extremadamente frío, entonces son cambios climáticos que nos están perjudicando mucho.
¿Qué es lo que le preocupa más acerca de los cambios climáticos, acerca de cómo van a afectar a sus hijos? ¿Qué es lo que los preocupa más?
A mí me preocupa su salud, me preocupa la salud de ellos.
La salud es importante.
Pues a mí también, porque inclusive él tiene asma y el otro más grande también tiene, pero usa su inhalador y se controla. Pero sí es lo que más me preocupa.
Was it hard for you, Juan, being in this weather, in this hot, smoky summer?
Yeah, because I would have to walk home most of the time, and it would be kind of hard to breathe.
Did you have a mask available to you? Because they were giving them out free finally, but it was late, and they're just now doing it.
¿Tienes una máscara o algo que
No mask.
Es un poco difícil hablar por parte de la comunidad, pero ustedes han visto con otros miembros de la comunidad que han visto otros como cambios que los han afectado acerca del clima.
Sí se ven muchos cambios, como donde yo soy casi no llovía mucho y ahora creo está lloviendo mucho, ha llovido mucho.
¿Mucha lluvia?
Mucha lluvia.
Primero no llovía y se pusieron y sembraron la milpa y se les secó y ahora está lloviendo mucho y ya sus cosechas ya no sirvieron.
¿Qué es lo que les gustaría ver o cambios que les gustaría ver en sus trabajos para mejorar las condiciones? No sabes que no podían trabajar o era un poco más difícil trabajar. ¿Cuáles cambios les gustaría? ¿Proben otro equipo? O,
Está difícil esa pregunta, está difícil porque el clima ya está ahí, o sea, no puede ser ni los patrones, ni nadie puede hacer nada. Entonces, pues, ¿qué me gustaría? Que no estuviera el clima así, pero no puedo cambiar, no tengo una varita para yo poderlo cambiar.
Todos queremos ver que el gobierno haga algunos cambios o algo para tener más impacto en esos cambios climáticos. ¿Y qué es lo que a ustedes les gustaría ver en términos a nivel nacional, regional, estatal o aquí localmente? ¿Qué es lo que piensan que ellos deben de estar haciendo para apoyar más esta idea de que hay cambios climáticos?
Mira, está también difícil esta pregunta porque los cambios climáticos ya están sabemos que es por la capa de ozono que está dañada. Lo único que se podría hacer carros que no usaran gasolina para que no se estuviera dañando más, porque es lo que más daña. Entonces, pues sería algo imposible que pudiera pasar, porque es lo que más daña. Y desgraciadamente aquí, si nos falta un jitomate, agarramos el carro y tenemos que ir a traerlo. No es un lujo aquí el carro, es una necesidad del carro. Entonces, pues no, el gobierno no puede hacer tampoco nada.
¿Qué es lo que desean para sus hijos de aquí en adelante? ¿Qué es lo que les gustaría ver cambios para ellos, como en términos del trabajo o tipo de trabajo que ellos tienen? Porque han tenido ustedes han trabajado duramente y a una vida no así tan fácil que digamos. ¿Y qué es lo que desean para sus hijos?
Pues sí, eso es lo que uno desea, lo mejor para ellos, que uno ha trabajado muy duro para ellos y que pues uno no quiere que trabajen donde ha trabajado uno porque es duro el trabajo. Quisiera que trabajaran en trabajos fáciles, pero pues bien pagados.
Pues eso sería todo. Muchas gracias por habernos invitado a ser parte de este video.
Muchas gracias a ustedes.
Aquí en Medford hay muchísimas personas y nosotros fuimos los agraciados para estar aquí con ustedes.
Sí.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Yo también les quiero dar las gracias y
Climate change is directly impacting our recreation and tourism economies in southern Oregon. The Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland is a leading economic contributor to the region. They produce 11 plays on 3 stages, including an outdoor Elizabethan theater for an 8-month season that attracts over 100,000 theater fans each year. Allison Carey is a playwright and artistic advisor and is the director of OSF's 10-year project, American Revolutions, the United States History Cycle. Claudia Alex served for years as the company's community producer, most notably directing The Green Show that takes place outdoors before each evening's performance.
One thing that in one of your activist roles, you did attend the climate march in April in Medford, Claudia, and you mentioned there that you have compiled a record of temperatures over a 10-year period. What did that record show as far as temperatures locally?
Well, it's a habit that most people do. When you have a show, you make a show report and you write down what are the things that you need to think about for that show. For us, our set is the world. We're outdoor theater. So one of the things we made sure to record was the beginning temperature and the ending temperature of each show. Now, primarily, we started doing this because we were hoping to find out what times of year are really, really hot, because maybe we won't book a large dance group at that time of year. What we found is this is 10 years worth of data, and we see that the temperatures have steadily gone up year after year after year. It's startling because you can really see it. It's a very clear picture that the numbers tell us. And that means we have to be way more thoughtful about safety for our performers and our audience. We now have extreme heat protocols that we make sure to enact to make sure everybody's safe. We also have protocols for smoke, for extreme weather like lightning or flood. And these are protocols we did not need to have a decade ago.
So when we had 3 really bad fire years recently, I think it was 2013 through 2015, and some shows were canceled. How many were canceled, and what was the monetary effect of those cancellations?
I believe it was 11 plays that were canceled between 2013 and 2015, and that was an impact of
almost $500,000.
Okay.
Significant.
And it's the
that's
impact,
huge.
it's a huge monetary impact, but it's also a huge psychological impact on the performers, sort of the uncertainty of, because it's not a perfect science, right, when it's too smoky, right? And the primary result of the fires was all the smoke that comes and sits in this basin. And you could even feel the smoke going into the indoor theaters, right? Because ultimately you're recirculating air, and when there's smoky air, it sneaks in. And the actors, you know, if you're singing or you're dancing, they're breathing in this smoke with very small particulates into their lungs, which can have a lasting impact. So you want to make sure that you actually call the performance before the time when you would endanger them in any way, but that is a very, very tricky thing to assess. So we try and be as responsible as we can while also being responsive to the needs and desires of our audiences. And of course, we have to worry about our audiences sitting in the smoky bowl and what's going to happen to them.
Well, I can give two observations. One is, I grew up in the Northwest. I grew up in Montana. So dealing with fire smoke has always actually been a part of my regular life practice, knowing that that comes every season. What we have noticed, though, tracking, is that it's coming more. It's happening more. The rates are higher. We have to be way more thoughtful. So the steps that we've been taking are to make sure that we have machinery to measure the level of particulates, making sure that we have really clear communication plans and decision-making plans to make sure we're being incredibly thoughtful about when do we make the call, and having a firm belief that we will make the call if that is necessary. We cancel the show if that is necessary.
You have a green task force that actually addresses some of those issues. What are some of the things you're doing in that regard and that you're looking ahead to do?
Well, the Green Task Force came really as a sort of a whole bunch of people from OSF concerned about this and figuring out what they can do. And I think over the years since it started, which was probably 9 years ago, some of the practices that were first brought up as being necessary to be intentional about among the festival, all across the festival, have happened. Our production practices have become less environmentally toxic. You know, our waste disposal is more efficient and directed, and things like increasing use in recycling, looking more at all the practices in terms of when we have buildings and we improve them, do we get the light switches that turn off the lights automatically when movement stops in the room, and that's all really important. I also think that we are also trying to use our power, such as it is, as storytellers, to try and sort of communicate the importance of this time in global history and inspire people to believe two things. One, that something very real is happening, and two, that we can do something about it. Because people tend to, you know this, people tend to shut down. It's scary, right? But so we have to find that sweet spot of, no, you can keep engaging. And I think we all believe that we can engage individually, but there's also, theater is such a great example of collaboration and broad scale engagement. That's just the way, and collaboration, that's how we do what we do. You can't make a play by yourself. And so we model that kind of, yes, if we work together, we can do this.
We also, as part of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, we try to be good citizens in our community, and I served on the Ashland City's ad hoc committee to create a plan to address climate change, and that was incredibly educational. It was a room full of community members. Some of the people at that table were scientists, others were retirees. There were high school students at that table, and there were people at that table who had been in green shows. Each one of them had a very specific perspective and a lot of knowledge they brought to the table, and I'm really proud that the city has created a plan to address climate change and will be taking steps to support that plan. But the biggest thing that I walked away from that table thinking was, we should have enacted this plan 20 years ago.
And for an example, one program we came up with is called Greenturgy. And this was inspired by a conversation with a guy named Tony Leiserowitz at the Yale Climate Change Communication Project. And he talked, unsurprisingly, about the way the United States over the past 200 years, especially white United States, has become almost willfully disassociated from the natural world around us, right? Because how else are you going to get people to go work in factories, right? Because if someone had to choose between working in a factory and working outdoors, like what would you choose? I suppose it depends on the circumstances, but generally, you know, we needed nature to become something bad. So one of the things we started this year with our education department is actually in all the conversations we have with students, with adults who come to talk about the plays, is we ask them to sort of reconnect with the world outside the play, because we tend to do plays that are set indoors, not all of them, but you know, you're in this room, right? But you say, well, the example we use is in the play called All the Way by Robert Schenken, which was commissioned from American Revolutions. There is a moment when Lyndon Johnson is negotiating with the senator for him to vote for the Civil Rights Act. And in order to get that vote, he gives the state rights to the Colorado River water, right? Which was a huge, the impact of how the Colorado River water was divvied up, huge impact on the way our country functions today. What is theater's role in inspiring people towards some direct action, as necessary as that action might be? How do we do that in a way that is welcoming rather than lecturing? And that's like putting the sort of worst possible spin on it. But I think the field as a whole has some trepidation because we don't know how to make the art yet. And we don't have enough variety of art around this issue yet so that everybody can find their own thing. You know, there are so many different plays on all kinds of different subjects. You can find the thing that touches your heart. So we are involved in an effort involving artists and scientists and social scientists, which will, we hope, result in a national convening next year, really looking at how we can help the scientists and social scientists deliver the message that needs to be delivered, while also the social scientists and scientists can tell us not only the latest climate science, but also how do you talk about this? And that's where the social science and the brain science comes in. How do you talk about this in a way that makes people brave and hopeful and activated? And that's a tricky thing that we're all trying to figure out together. But that's it. Like once we get that, we're good. We're not there yet.
The work that I produce is me receiving the energy of the community and lifting up the things that are the loudest and the most urgent. And as the years have passed, the number of artistic projects or artistic stories that are reflecting upon our community's responses to climate change, they've just risen. They get higher and higher and higher every year. So for me, it's not even a necessity to have it as a programmatic goal in my work. It's already there and it'll always be there until we address this thing.
Yes. Okay. So next year we'll be done.
At Ashland Middle School, teachers are mandated by the state to teach climate change as part of the Next Generation Science Standards. As part of its educational mission, Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, or SOCAN, provides curriculum materials and presentations to teachers and their classrooms. For 7th grader Amelia Oskay, like for many people, the subject of climate change stirs up fear and dread. Teacher Jen Craw finds that transparency and action are the antidotes.
So, do you remember when I was here before? Effects of climate change in the Rogue Valley?
That thing, yeah.
Remember that? Okay. And so I was here for that. And so that was one thing I kind of wanted to ask both of you about. And maybe you could start by telling us about you were in a unit, I believe, on climate change.
Right, so this was actually the first time we did an actual climate change unit. It's part of the new NGSS science standards, which is great. So we did an entire unit. It wasn't a huge unit, it was 4 weeks maybe. And so we looked at causes of climate change and effects of climate change, different areas. The students each did a research project with a partner or two and made a poster, and those were about the effects of climate change on various aspects of Earth.
I remember being super depressed and scared that our planet is slowly dying.
Okay, and do you think other people share that feeling?
Yes. Mostly the sad part though.
Okay.
Not terrified. Or maybe vice versa, I don't know. I don't know what other people think.
And how did you incorporate that, those feelings, those concerns in the things you were doing?
Well, when Amelia came to me the one day before class, and came up to me with this face and said, I don't want to come to science today. And I said, oh, well, shoot, why not? And she said, climate change is depressing. I said, yeah, it is. But we can, so when I get scared of something or find something fearful or depressing, then I usually think now, as an adult, I've learned to think, okay, what can I do to make myself feel better? So take some action. So we started right away, only using half of our lights, and talking about what we can do at home, each of us individually, even though it doesn't feel like a lot, and maybe sometimes it feels silly when we just do a teeny little thing and we think, oh, I'm not making any difference. If we think about if everybody were doing that, it would make a huge difference. So we started paying attention to what we were doing here and at home, right? And I think it helped us feel like we were at least doing something. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately we sent our posters to Donald Trump. Haven't heard anything back.
So when you did things in the classroom, then to like turning the lights off, what kind of an impact did that have on you? Or how did you respond to that?
I felt a little better and a little less sad because people care and that's good.
Do you feel that people are willing to do things?
Not all people. Humans as a whole are actually doing a pretty bad job. But yes, I feel like some people are willing to do things.
Okay. And does that help you deal with it a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
How about yourself? Are you doing things?
Yes.
What kind of things?
Lots of unplugging.
Lots of what?
Unplugging.
Unplugging. So as you do things as a teacher, what kinds of things do you have to consider with students as you're addressing issues like climate change?
Well, my personal belief is that the truth is the best way to go with everything. So I don't change the facts, certainly. I mostly just take into account, I prefer a discussion of the reality of it than skirting some of the reality of it. So we talked about pretty much all of it, and we looked at the effects, and they were terrifying, as Amelia said, many of them. And not to say that I'm not sensitive to the students' emotional ideas and needs, but I think just for myself, I always like to know the truth. And I feel like if I know the truth, then I can do something, rather than if I'm not informed, I maybe don't even think I need to do something. So I think they can handle it. It's their world coming, they're coming into it. It's not great news, but I think from what I've seen of children this age, they want to know. They want to know the truth of what the world is, what the world is like, what's good, what's bad, and feel some kind of ability to have some say or control over some things.
If I know a person who's your age or middle, maybe a little younger, and they are very concerned about climate change, what kinds of things would you tell them?
Wow, okay. I tell them that, well, at least you know the truth. I mean, that's good. At least you're aware of what's going on. And don't forget, people are out there trying to do stuff, renewable energy. They're trying.
Willow Wit Ranch is a 440-acre, thriving farm in the Southern Cascades. with a commitment to land preservation and to sustainable farm and forest management. Owners Suzanne Willow and Lenita Witt run their operations entirely off-grid, offering farm stays in addition to their goat and vegetable business. They have seen significant change in temperatures in their 32 years on the land and have witnessed the migration of mourning doves, quail, and other species up to the cooler climes at their 4,600 feet elevation. Similar, they say, to the vital animal corridors that the expansion of the Cascade-Siskiyou Monument will provide to allow for animal and plant adaptation and survival as our climate continues to change.
In our first 10 years here, it wasn't uncommon to have sub-zero weather, and we've not had sub-zero weather in probably 20 years, I would say.
Yeah, and 2-0 or just above it, but our lowest recorded when we were first here was -18.
But are more challenges for an organic ranch than a traditional ranch?
I don't think so. I think it's easier because organic, both organic animal husbandry and organic vegetable farming, and our entire land is 445 acres, is all organic certified. I think it's actually easier because it's a big part of organic is taking care of the soil, which makes for healthy microbes, which makes for healthy gases going in and out of the soil, and makes for healthy animals. And the animals are using our native forage. So I think if anything it's much easier. If one were using chemical inputs, I think that would be much harder to adapt. And so basically building soil and keeping soil healthy and keeping our animals healthy so they have less impact, putting them on different pastures at different times so they have actually more positive impact and less negative impact, I think is much easier. And that's part of organic farming.
Cows have an impact on the climate, and cows are a part of climate change, and they happen to be the protein source that came with the Euro-Americans. Otherwise it was bison and venison and rabbit and probably a little porcupine thrown in here and there.
One of the other things that I know that you have mentioned doing is there was logging in this area, and you've taken some steps to mitigate the effects of that. Could you just describe what you've done in that regard?
Coming from Texas where there were no trees, I had no idea what a forest management plan would be, but we were fortunate to engage with Marty Main, who is very savvy, and he went through our forest and said, you have a very sick forest. So over 10 years we went through and took out a lot of monoculture of white fir with mistletoe, which when you log and intervene in an area, you change the ecosystem and you take out the biggest and the best. And even with replanting, plantations are not the answer in terms of disease or fire resilience, but we replanted with Doug fir and ponderosa pine, and all the sugar pine has been gone because it requires fire to pop the cones and germinate the seeds. And so at that point, that many years ago, we didn't replant sugar pine, but that was a predominant species here too. So the impacts of that, we call it high-grade logging. After 10 years, we'd gone through all areas and taken out the diseased and dying, and it is not really a salvage logging in terms of salvaging the lumber for commercial use.
Sanitation.
There's more sanitation and rehabilitation programs. So we've also done some small diameter thinning to cut the understory so that you release the trees to grow better, and it also reduces fire danger doing that. And we've had one tiny control burn on one little slope to clear the underbrush.
So we actually do log, we do timber sales, we do commercial timber sales of trees that are commercially saleable. They have to be a certain size log to be merchantable, certain diameter at breast height, and then certain length. And so we do those commercial loggings in order to keep the forest healthy, and in order to open up the forest, and in order to keep the biggest trees, the best parent trees growing, and to keep them healthy. And if you start getting too close, the trees are too close, then there's actually a lot of interaction that happens, and somebody has to die, and we hope that we're going to keep the parent trees, the better ones, alive. And so that's why we do commercial logging at this point. The thing that's paid off the most for fire resiliency is really having our forests open.
How do you think the monument, from your perspective, is going to help, in some ways at least, reduce some of the effects on wildlife and animals when climate change really starts to accelerate? Do you have any perspective on that at this point?
The big value is that the timberland will be managed for environment and not extraction.
It'll be managed the way we manage ours.
And
the BLM.
Cattle, and cattle can still graze, but they'll be in designated areas, not in wetlands. And hopefully that protection will come to wetland watershed areas. But it's a synchronous move. The expansion is to allow those species room to find higher elevation. And fortunately we're in a higher elevation, and we're just east of Grizzly Peak with its old growth, and so we're part of that higher elevation reach. So we're very...
And hopefully it really will be that connectivity of having continuous movement for all the plants and animals, and even trees that are going to have to start moving to higher elevations to maintain temperature, are going to have more space to go. And of course they'll go through our land too, but have more space in the higher elevations to maintain health of the populations.
Sarah Spansale is a native Oregonian who remembers indelibly learning at the age of 10 that climate change was accelerating faster than scientists had first calculated. And so as a young adult, she became active with environmental and social issues, working under Energy Trust of Oregon, coordinating a residential energy efficiency program. Now, as a young mother of 2 children, she has personally felt the impact from severe wildfires that make it intolerable for her young children to be outdoors. Still, she passes down her resolve and hope to her boys as they grow in awareness of the pressing challenge to their generation.
You grew up here. Have you seen, since your early years here into the present, have you actually experienced some climate changes that you've noticed?
Yeah, so, well, for one thing, I mean, I grew up here. I left when I was 22 for about 9 years to live in the Portland area. And I think it was maybe a year before I left that the Biscuit Fire happened. And that was a very intense summer of heat and smoke. But then I was gone for almost a decade. My husband and I decided to come home to start our family and have more of a family network support as we were making that decision. And that was the summer of 2013, and I was in my 3rd trimester with my oldest son, Simon, and I felt like I couldn't leave my home because of the smoke was so bad, and just concerns for, you know, the health effects of my baby at that time. And, you know, we had fires when I was a kid, but I don't remember it ever, you know, being as, lasting as long in the valley, the smoke, or just being as intense and thick as it has been in 2013 and 2015, both times.
As far as some simple things that people could do that maybe it would get people started in a less expensive way, perhaps. Do you have any suggestions there?
Well, there's always like very easy things of just, you know, turning off things around your home or unplugging them. I don't know if you've heard of phantom loads, but you know, you're charging your phone and you unplug your phone from the charger, but you leave that charger plugged in. I mean, there's such there is a certain amount of power that is being drawn from that, and it's, best practices to unplug those things. Insulating your homes, air sealing is something that a lot of people don't know about, and if you're in an older home, it can have huge effects, which is like caulking all those little gaps along floorboards or around the doors and making sure that your home's nice and tight. Looking in, if you are a homeowner, to the programs that are still available, and especially taking advantage of them, while they still have support, I think is important if you have that ability. And then, of course, just, I know talent, basically getting out there too and supporting your community. Especially in the Rogue Valley, we're really lucky that we have so many great organizations that really care about the planet and want to make sure that our valley and our residents in our community are as protected with the changes that are going to happen. It's inevitable at this point that we're going to have the effects of climate change here, and the more we can be a community and stand up and support each other and support the other communities as they try to do things like to protect themselves in the future, I think is important. But I'm definitely a believer and a proponent that it isn't. I think that it's possible for our country and globally for us to transition to renewable energies. And to me, that's the answer. And of course, there's so much work involved with that, and infrastructure building. But I don't believe it's impossible. And if not federally, let's do it in our state, because Oregon's ready to be a leader, I think, in these ways.
Well, one thing that just as maybe a final comment, you have 2 children, so you have hope.
I do.
Because you see your family continuing into the future. Do you have any final appeal that you want to make to the people that might be watching or seeing this video, or just to your fellow citizens in our area?
Let's care about the future, and let's make our children aware of it. I definitely shelter my son, who's almost 4, from a lot of things, but one of the things that we haven't sheltered him from is the fact that there are problems with the planet. And he recently actually had a grandparent pass away, or a great-grandparent. And so he's definitely going into that 3-year-old, 4-year-old phase of kind of what is that and what does that mean. But the other night he said to me, after talking a little bit about his great-grandpa, he was like, "Mom, is Mother Earth dying?" And I was just like, Mother Earth is sick, Simon, but that's why we have to take care of her. And as you grow up, I hope that you'll do everything that you can do to help make her better. And that's what we're going to be doing. And my goal for him and for my youngest as well is as legislation comes up in the future and they get older, I've been in Salem on lobby days and seen children, and I look at those kids and I'm like, this is what I hope to do with my children as they get old enough, is have them be a voice, not only for their community, but for the planet.
Earth-based cultures, such as the Native American peoples of this land, have ways of understanding the relationship between humans and the natural world that can shed light on the deep cultural conditionings that have contributed to climate change. Carpenter Dan Wapipaw built his own home in rural Medford, Oregon, and started the grassroots organization Red Earth Descendants to offer Native traditions and training to next generations.
In the time that you've been here, have you noticed, what have you noticed in the way of changing weather?
I noticed the summers are a lot drier, and trees make rain. And so we need to be aware of how we manage our forests. Back in the day, in this valley here, they did a fire ecology, which they burnt the forest down, and a lot of that would be Douglas fir, because Douglas fir was almost an invasive species, considered an invasive species. The reason for burning was to encourage new growth of like basket material, plants and whatnot, And so the forest ecology, and also to preserve the oaks, so the forest ecology through fire burning, was the primary land management use here. You know, so but I've noticed the drier forests. I've also noticed just in the past 2 years the trees burning are not dying, and that's part of the Iroquois prophecy is the trees will start dying from the tops down. A lot of that, I don't know if that's bark beetles or what, but it's all part of the prophecies, and we're at a crossroads of prophecies right now, of Native American prophecies. So.
Have those prophecies hinted at this, indicated that this may be something that will happen?
Well, there's there's a lot of prophecy saying, you know, the massive fish kills, rivers catching on fire, trees dying from the tops down. All of these have come to pass, you know, and so we're living at a time where we need to pay attention. Like my elders say, you'll see the good get better and the bad get worse, and we're living in that time, that serious dichotomy right now.
Just from your perspective, as a tribal member, how do you react to what's happening to the earth?
Well, the earth is our church. The earth is, you know, you could take the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, you know, these things govern societies, you know, but what governs life? Biodiversity, water, the earth itself. Those things govern life. Those things are sacred. Those things are truly holy. You know, you can call the Bible holy, but this out here is truly holy. You know, we have recognized that all the animals are our elder brothers and sisters, and they take care of us. You know, they contribute to life. You know, they all, in some form or another, contribute to life. But human beings don't really contribute to life, and so that's where we've stepped off the road. There's at one time, medicine bundles handed down to all the races of the earth, and these medicine bundles help govern our way of living and our way of praying and everything like that, and our relationship with the earth. The Inquisition happened, and that was an example, of 500 years of torturing earth-based cultures to making them believe in some celestial city in the sky through maiming, killing, torture, rape, you know, all this stuff, you know. And so made them love what they once feared, and that caused a trauma, because when you have group oppression, you have a cell reaction, and your cells change the DNA, and so that's being studied and proven now. And so that DNA gets passed on to future generations, and so this is a fear DNA. When you have fear, you lack critical thinking.
What would you like to see in the way of education to bring us this change in consciousness so that our children and grandchildren are more able to grow up in a society like you're describing that would be more friendly to the earth?
Amazing.
Okay, I think what we're talking about is natives really have a word for it, is decolonization. So colonization probably happened since the Fertile Crescent, you know, where we started gathering groups of people to harvest the food to benefit one person, you know, and then this one person gathered with the other one person, they gathered with the other one persons, and they started managing society, you know, and they started colonizing society. So we have colonialism, where they came in and set up colonies. That's colonialism. Colonization is what happens in the mind. It what happens that governs society. So colonization exists in our government, it exists in our military, it exists in our sports, our fashion, the schooling, everything is colonizing, you know, the human beings to turn them into worker bees for the richest families in the world, you know. So that's what colonization is. So in order to decolonize, we have to be able to realize that our elder brothers and sisters out here, all these trees and all these winged ones and all those under the waters and all those that burrow, all those that crawl, all these that stand, you know, that they are our elder brothers, and that we have to respect them, you know, as elder brothers, because we're the young people on the earth, you know. There's a saying out there called, how do we steward the earth? We don't steward the earth. All we can do is limit our damage to the earth. The earth will get along just fine without human beings. So we're not the stewards of the earth. That's an arrogance. That's a hubris. And so we believe as natives, we have an inherent beauty. That's what we have. You know, so when we say human being, because there's many people but very few human beings, you know, when we say human being, we meant what the Creator's idea of what a human being should be, to be loving, kind, compassionate, giving, gifting, receiving, all this stuff, you know. To be human being is to be the highest form of what we can be. That's what we would name progress. All this, the heavy machinery out there, they call that progress. That's a flip on what progress actually is. That's a destruction of the earth. You know, this society is a destruction of the earth. It's built on it, it does it. You know, my house, the footprint is huge. We built this house before I was even aware of natural resources and all the stuff, you know, so it's way bigger than what we need, you know. Raised a family here, but the family's up and out, and it's just my wife here, my wife and I, and so we want to be able to realize all the burden that we individually put on the earth, all the carbon footprint, the resources that we use, and to be able to limit those, because what we use right now is taken from our future generations. So if we keep on living, consuming, they will receive very little. If we live conservatively and buy minimally and don't order our food from India, you know, then we will be conserving for our future generations. We can't move into a new society without hope in our prayer, in our hearts, and in our walk, you know. So we have to be hopeful, because at this point, you know, with Fukushima, with global warming, with methane, all this stuff going on, you know, natural disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, you know, what we need to do as human beings is come into our spirituality, because this world, this earth, all this stuff out here, this is spirituality. There's only one creation. But we are on a verge of a great medicine. In all our stories, where we receive a great medicine like tobacco or the pipe, there comes a phrase that the people have lost their way, and we have certainly lost our way. So I believe that something big is on the horizon. So I have the hope that this is going to happen. This is a song, Ina is said a number of times, and then Wichozani Wa, which means I pray for a good life for you. Ina, Ina, Wa. Wa